The morning light rises pale over the small German village, and the air carries a heavy silence broken only by the distant echo of a bicycle wheel turning on the uneven stones. The postman comes slowly down the lane, his breath white in the cold air, and the people watch him from their windows, afraid and hopeful. All at once they have waited for so long, through endless weeks of rumors and silence, through nights filled with prayers that went unanswered, and through days when hope felt like something forbidden. The war has taken so much from them, sons and fathers, husbands and brothers, and now there are only letters to tell them what still lives and what is gone. The postman stops before each house and his hands tremble a little, because he knows that what he carries can break a heart or heal it just for a moment. The mothers step forward with faces pale from worry. They have learned to read the smallest signs, the color of the envelope, the shape of the handwriting, the sound of the paper tearing open, and they search for meaning in every crease and fold. One of them. Frau Adler, the baker's wife, takes a letter with both hands, as though it were a piece of glass, fragile and sacred. She runs her fingers over the strange stamps. She has never seen before and wonders what the words mean. Camp something, America. The letters of her son Hans, who vanished near the end of the fighting. She had imagined him in a frozen trench or a muddy prison somewhere in France, but not across. The ocean not in a land she has only heard of in stories. Inside the small cottage, the air smells of bread and ashes. She sits at the table, her daughter beside her, and opens the letter slowly. The paper crackles like dry leaves. She stares at the lines of neat handwriting and her breath catches. The words are clear but strange, each sentence filled with gentleness and disbelief. Her son writes that he is alive, that he is treated fairly, that he has warm clothes and food, that the guards smile and speak to him kindly. He writes of camp songs and lessons in English, of seeing movies and eating meat that tastes like nothing he has known before. He says the Americans are not what he was told. They are not cruel or soulless. They are people, with laughter and kindness, and that thought fills her with confusion. Outside, other families are gathered on doorsteps, each holding their own letter. Some read aloud, some cannot speak at all. One woman drops to her knees in the snow, whispering her son's name over and over. Another clutches the paper to her chest, afraid to read what it says, and a man stands in the doorway staring at the letter without opening it, because he fears the truth inside more than he fears not knowing anything. At all, the village has not seen joy in years, but today there is something different. Not joy, not sorrow. Something in between, something like disbelief, that their loved ones might still be alive, but changed. The letters speak of fields beyond barbed, wire of blue skies and open air, of a strange kindness that confuses the men who were told that the enemy was savage. The prisoners write of hearing music from radios, of seeing women driving trucks, of tasting sweet drinks that fizz in the mouth. They write of Coca-Cola and hamburgers, of the smell of coffee and soap, and the laughter of guards who speak freely of things they are not supposed to discuss. The tone of the letters feels wrong to the readers, too soft, too light. It sounds like a dream, and the families wonder if the censors have changed the words or if their sons have truly forgotten who they are. In the village square, old men sit by the fountain and talk quietly, their faces gray with exhaustion. One of them, a retired soldier, mutters that the letters are lies, that the Americans want to break their spirit to turn their sons into weak men who no longer believe in their homeland. Others remain silent because deep inside they are tired of believing anything. They have seen enough death to know that truth and lies are sometimes the same thing under war. A few of them remember the last war, and how their own fathers came home, broken, silent, unable to explain what they had seen, and now they wonder if the same will happen again as the day goes on. The letters are read and reread until the paper becomes soft from fingers and tears. Candles burn in windows as the light fades. Children sit quietly at the tables, listening to their mothers whisper words they do not fully understand, words about kindness and confusion, about how the world might be different than they were told. The sound of weeping drifts from house to house, a quiet, broken sound that belongs neither to grief nor to relief. Frau Adler sits, long after dark, staring at the letter, her eyes tracing every curve of her son's writing. She tries to picture him in that faraway land with wide skies and strange voices. She wonders if he still remembers the smell of their kitchen, the sound of the church bell, the way the river froze in winter. She wonders if he is the same Hans who marched away so proud in his uniform, or if he has become someone new, someone she might not know when he returns. She folds the letter carefully and places it in a box with his photograph beside the medals that no longer shine. In another house, a young wife named Lotta holds a letter from her husband Otto. He writes that he misses her, but that he has learned things he never knew before he writes that. The Americans speak openly to each other, even to their superiors, that they laugh and question orders, and no one punishes them. He says it feels like breathing after a long silence. He wonders what kind of country allows such freedom and such chaos. She reads those words again and again, her heart tightening with something she cannot name. Pride, maybe, or sorrow, or fear. She knows that when Otto comes home, if he ever does, he will not be the same man who left. The church bell rings in the distance, marking the hour. But no one moves to attend the evening prayer. They sit with their letters holding them close as if afraid the paper will vanish, as if these words from across the ocean are the last connection to a world that still believes in mercy. The air grows colder, and the snow begins to fall soft and slow. Covering the streets like a blanket of silence, the postman rides away his bag now empty, his eyes heavy with the knowledge that tomorrow he will have to do it again. Carrying more words that will change the hearts of those who receive them, in the stillness of the night. The village seems to breathe differently. The letters lie on tables and windowsills, like small fragments of another world, a world that feels too bright, too distant to be real, but inside every heart, something begins to stir. Something small and fragile like a spark hidden in ashes, a thought that maybe the war will end someday, and that the sons they lost to the world might come back not as soldiers, but as men who have seen the other side and lived to tell about it. The next morning comes gray and heavy with mist. The village still feels the echo of the letters from the day before, as if the air itself carries the weight of every word that crossed the ocean. The people move quietly through the streets, their faces pale and thoughtful, each one holding something inside that cannot be spoken aloud. The letters have unsettled them. They have stirred old hopes and new doubts, and no one knows what to make of them. Frau Adler stands by her window watching the fields beyond the road. The snow from the night has melted into thin veins of mud, and the wind smells of damp earth. She holds her son's letter again, though she has read it 100 times. She cannot stop reading. She keeps tracing the words with her eyes, hoping that by some miracle, new ones will appear, words that say when he will come home, or if he still believes in the same things she does. She tries to hear his voice through the paper, but the voice that speaks in her mind no longer sounds like the boy she remembers. It sounds older, softer, as if the war has taken away the sharpness from his heart. The postman returns that morning, his bicycle creaking beneath. The weight of new letters, and the people watch him again from their doors, but this time there is no rush to meet him. They are afraid of what more letters might bring, afraid of what more truth might sound like. He stops at the blacksmith's house, at the teacher's house, at the small shop by the church, and each time he knocks, the door opens with hesitation, as if behind it lies something sacred and dangerous. The blacksmith, Herr Vogt, reads his son's letter in silence, sitting beside the forge, that no longer burns his hands black with soot. He reads about work details and camp life, about men from all over Europe living together and learning to speak each other's tongues. He reads how his son helps repair farm tools and how the Americans Pay him in cigarettes and sweets, he reads how his son says the guards treat them fairly and that some even share stories about their families back home. The blacksmith frowns at the words and mutters that the boy must be dreaming that the enemy must have found a way to twist his mind. But even as he says it, there is a small warmth inside him, a relief that his son is alive and not broken. In the schoolhouse, the teacher, Fräulein Weber, gathers the children for their lessons. But the children do not listen. Their parents have whispered too much at home. They ask her what America looks like, and if the prisoners really live like that, she does not know what to answer. She has seen the photographs in old geography books showing tall buildings, wide streets, shiny cars, and faces smiling freely. She tells the children that every land has its truth and that they must not believe everything they hear. But her voice trembles and she wonders if even she believes what she says. As the day unfolds, the letters become the heartbeat of the village. Men gather by the tavern doorway. Though the beer is long gone, they sit on benches and talk in low voices about what the prisoners have written. One man says his cousin in another town race. The women whisper among themselves. By the well, drawing buckets of cold water, they share the words that linger in their minds like ghosts. Words about laughter, music, freedom, and food they cannot imagine. One woman says that her husband wrote about eating meat every day, and she laughs bitterly, saying she cannot even find flour anymore. Another says her son wrote that he wants to learn English, that he likes how it sounds on his tongue, and that he dreams of traveling one day. The women exchange looks filled with confusion and envy. They do not know if they should feel proud or betrayed. The priest, Father Brenner, walks through the village at dusk. He carries no sermon, only silence. He knows what the letters mean. He has read one himself from his nephew taken prisoner in Italy. It spoke of kindness and humanity, and it frightened him more than hatred ever could, because kindness has power to make men question everything they have been told. He wonders how many hearts will be changed by these letters and whether faith can survive such change. That night the wind rises again, whistling through cracks in the walls. Candles flicker behind curtains, and the sound of paper rustling fills the rooms as families read once more by dim light. Every letter becomes a bridge between two worlds, one built on obedience and silence, the other on words spoken freely. The contrast hurts like a wound, yet it fascinates them. They can feel the pull of that other world, even if they will never see. Right in one house, an old woman reads her son's letter to her neighbors. Her voice trembling, she speaks of how he saw American children playing in the streets, how they laughed without fear, and how he could not stop watching them. He wrote that he felt both joy and sadness, as if he had glimpsed a life that might have been his, if the world had taken a different turn. The old woman finishes the letter, and no one speaks for a long time, because each person in the room feels that same ache deep insides. Midnight comes. The village grows still, but the minds of its people do not rest. Dreams come filled with strange images, wide roads, bright skies, faces that smile without reason, music that drifts from unseen places. The letters have opened a door that cannot be closed, and beyond it lies a truth that both comforts and unsettles them. By morning the snow has fallen again, covering footprints and fields. The postman rides once more, his bag empty now, but his heart heavy with the weight of what he has delivered. He knows that the letters will continue to come, and that each one will peel away another layer of illusion, until the war itself feels like a story. From another time he pedals down the road, disappearing into the mist while behind him the village begins to stir once more, bound together by words written by men who are far away, yet closer than ever before. The days pass slowly, and the air in the village feels heavier with each sunrise. The people now live between silence and curiosity their lives, turning around the strange letters that came from across the ocean. The letters have become more than just words. They are mirrors showing reflections no one expected to see, reflections of kindness and of questions that have no answers. In the small bakery, Frau Adler works beside her daughter, kneading dough with hands that never seem to rest. The scent of warm bread fills the air, but even that comfort feels dim. She still thinks of the letter and the words of her son. Hans, they repeat in her head, while she measures flour, while she watches the fire, while she lies awake at night. He wrote of freedom a word that now feels dangerous and beautiful. She wonders if such a thing could exist for ordinary people. She tries not to speak of it, but sometimes the word slips through her thoughts like sunlight between clouds at the tavern. The men gather again, their voices low and restless. They argue about what the prisoners wrote. Some call it weakness. Others call it awakening. One says that war was meant to make men strong, but another answers that perhaps real strength is in mercy and not in cruelty. No one knows what to believe anymore. They drink water instead of beer and pretend it still warms them. They speak of the coming winter of rumors that the war might end soon, though none dare to hope aloud. Fräulein Weber, the teacher, has begun to keep a secret notebook. She writes down pieces of the letters that parents read to her. She does not know why she does it. Perhaps she wants to preserve them before they are lost. She writes about how the prisoners describe the land of the enemy, the open skies, the endless fields, the way Americans talk freely even in front of officers. She wonders what such freedom feels like. She has lived her whole life in a place where words must be chosen carefully, where truth hides behind silence. Each time she writes, she feels both guilt and wonder, as if she were holding something forbidden and sacred at once. In one of the larger houses, the mayor meets with a few men from the party. They talk in harsh whispers about the danger of these letters. They say that such words can weaken the people. They decide that the next batch of mail must be read and filtered more carefully before being given to the families. They speak of duty and discipline, but even among them there is unease. One man admits that his own son wrote from America, and that his heart broke to read it because it sounded like a confession, not of guilt, but of awakening, and he could not bring himself to destroy it. The priest. Father Brenner walks past the square where children play in the snow. They throw handfuls of white powder into the air. Laughing, he stops and listens. Their laughter feels strange to him, too pure for such a time. He thinks of his nephew again, and the letter that spoke of the Americans singing hymns in their own tongue. He wonders if faith sounds the same in every language. If God listens without borders, he lights a candle in the church and prays not for victory but for understanding, though he would never say it aloud. The letters have changed the rhythm of the village. Every household has its own ritual, now reading and rereading the words, discussing them in whispers, then falling silent when others pass by. There is fear in their curiosity, because to question is to risk everything. Still, the seed of wonder grows in them, and it cannot be uprooted once it has taken hold. At night, Frau Adler dreams of her son standing in a field far away, his uniform gone, replaced by simple clothes, his hands clean, his face calm. He looks older but peaceful. She wakes with tears on her cheeks and sits by the window, watching the faint light of dawn. She thinks of how the letter spoke of laughter, and of how laughter had become rare in her house. She wonders if perhaps laughter itself is a kind of freedom. Elsewhere in the village, Lotta waits by the fire. Her husband's letter folded neatly beside her. She reads it again and again. He wrote that he feels torn between worlds, that he misses her and their home, but he cannot hate the people who captured him. He wrote that they share their stories with him, that they speak of dreams, not orders. She reads the lines until they blur before her eyes. She wonders if she has lost him to kindness instead of death, and that thought hurts in a way she cannot explain. Rumors begin to spread across nearby towns. Some say the Americans allow prisoners to work freely, to learn to read, and even to attend lectures. Others claim it is a lie, meant to soften them, to make them forget their country. The truth becomes tangled in fear and pride, but in the hearts of the families who have seen the letters there is no turning back. They have felt something shift, even if they cannot name it. One afternoon, a new batch of letters arrives this time, fewer in number, and the postman's face is weary as he delivers them. He tells Frau Adler quietly that the censors have grown stricter, that not every letter will reach its home. She nods, though her eyes fill with worry. She knows that words can be as dangerous as weapons. Now she clutches the paper close and prays that her son will still be able to write the A. Letter she receives is shorter than the last. It speaks more cautiously, but between the lines, she feels his voice. He writes of a library built by prisoners where they read American books and discuss ideas. He does not name them, but she senses what he means. He says that sometimes he forgets the barbed wire when he reads because in his mind he walks free. Those words make her heart ache. She wants to be proud, but pride feels too close to fear. As evening falls, the snow glows faintly under the moon. The village seems quieter than before. The people move like shadows through the streets. The letters lie hidden in drawers and under mattresses, guarded like treasures and secrets. At the same time, the words have become part of their lives, shaping their dreams, their doubts, their prayers in the silence of night. Frau Adler steps outside. She looks toward the west, where the sea lies far beyond the horizon, where America waits unseen. She whispers her son's name into the wind. She wonders if he can feel it, if somewhere beyond the fences and the guards, he feels her voice. She knows he is changing, and she fears that change yet. Deep inside, she senses that maybe change is the only thing that will save them all. The night grows colder, the stars shimmer faintly above, and the village sleeps, but not peacefully. The letters have awoken something that cannot be silenced, something that moves quietly beneath. Every thought a yearning for truth, a longing for light even in the heart of darkness. The days grew longer, though the light felt thin and tired across the village, and the hearts of the people carried a weight that words could not lift. The letters kept coming, but fewer now, and each one seemed to carry not only news, but a quiet echo of change that frightened and comforted them at once. In the camp far across the ocean, the German prisoners woke before sunrise, as they always did. The air smelled of dew and dust, and the faint sweetness of grass that grew beyond the wire fences. They had grown used to the rhythm of the days, the roll calls, the work details, the meals that came on time, and the faces of guards who no longer seemed like enemies but simply men, doing what they must. The prisoners had built small gardens, planted rows of beans and flowers. The work filled their hands, and for a while, it made them forget where they were. Hans Adler stood beside one of those gardens, his shovel resting in the dirt. His thoughts drifting homeward, he had written 2 letters since. The first one, and he knew that only one had reached his mother. The second had been returned by the censors with whole lines blacked out. The words that remained looked strange, even to him hollow, like the outline of a thought that could not be spoken. He tried to rewrite it that night, but his mind would not settle. The words he wanted to say did not fit the page. They felt too wide, too alive. Around him, the camp stirred with quiet voices, men speaking in German, English, Polish, fragments of languages mixing together like threads of smoke. There was talk of food, of family, of peace, and sometimes of home, though the word home had come to mean something different for each man. Some spoke of returning to fields and wives and children. Others spoke of not returning at all, of finding work in this vast country, where the sun felt kinder than the one they left behind. Hans listened and said little, but when he looked toward the horizon, he felt something in his chest, a strange lightness. That frightened him. Inside the barracks, the men had begun to make things with their hands, small carvings from wood paintings made with crushed berries and clay. One of the guards, a man from Kansas, brought them scraps of paper and old magazines. and they tore the pages carefully, staring at the pictures of smiling people and busy streets. They saw faces of women in bright dresses, cars that gleamed like silver, and families sitting together at tables covered in food. The images felt unreal, like dreams from another world, but they studied them with wonder and silence. That evening, Hans sat by the fence, watching the sky turn the color of ash and honey. He heard an American guard humming a tune, slow and simple. He did not know the words, but the melody wrapped around him, and he found himself humming it too. When the guard noticed, he smiled and nodded, and Hans felt a flicker of warmth between them, not as enemies, not as soldiers, just as men breathing the same air. He thought of how strange it was that music could cross a line that words could not. The next day, the prisoners were given letters from home. Hans held his breath as his name was called. The paper was thin and worn, but when he saw his mother's handwriting, his eyes filled with tears. She wrote of the village, of the snow melting, of the bakery, still standing, though customers were few. She wrote that she had read his letter many times, and that she was proud and confused and afraid. She wrote that she prayed for him every night, that she believed God would guide him no matter where he was. She did not say she missed him, but he could feel it in every line. He pressed the letter to his chest, and for a moment the camp disappeared. Later that night he sat with his friend Otto by the small fire they had built from dry grass. Otto had also received a letter from his wife, and his hands trembled as he read it aloud. She wrote of ration lines, of rumors that the war might end, of whispers about surrender. She wrote that people no longer shouted in the streets, but spoke softly as if afraid of their own voices. Otto folded the letter and said quietly that he did not know what home meant anymore. Hans understood. He felt the same. In the distance they could hear laughter from one of the American huts. The guards had a radio playing a song, cheerful and fast, the kind that made feet tap without thinking. Some of the prisoners smiled, others turned away, but none could escape the sound. It was too alive, too full of light. Hans thought of his mother hearing that same kind of song through his words, and how strange it must sound to her ears. Days passed into weeks, and spring began to stir in the air. The camp looked almost peaceful when the sun rose. Over it, golden light spilling across the wire, and the rows of men at work. Hans spent his hours building wooden crates for fruit shipments. He liked the rhythm of the hammer, the clean smell of pine. One afternoon, an American officer stopped to watch him work and asked if he had done carpentry before. Hans shook his head, and the man laughed, saying he had a good hand for it. Later he gave Hans an extra loaf of bread without a word, and Hans felt gratitude and guilt mingle in his chest at night. The prisoners gathered to talk about what would happen when the war ended. Some dreamed of going home, others feared what they would find there. There were stories of cities bombed to rubble, of families gone missing, of new borders being drawn. No one knew what to believe. Hans listened and felt the ground shifting beneath him. The idea of home had become both hope and shadow. He began another letter that night, the candlelight flickering on the rough table. He wrote slowly, his words uncertain. He told his mother that he was alive, that the camp was calm, that the Americans treated them with fairness. He did not write of his doubts or his questions. He did not tell her that he sometimes woke from dreams of wide, empty fields where no flag flew, he wrote. Instead of flowers growing near the fence, of birds landing on the wire unafraid of the guards. He wrote that he missed her, that he remembered the smell of bread and the sound of the church bell. He wrote until the candle burned low, then folded the paper carefully and waited for morning. When the dawn came, he slipped the letter into the box, knowing it would travel farther than he could imagine. Perhaps it would reach her, perhaps not, but the act of writing was enough. It tied him to something beyond fences and orders, beyond war itself. And as the sun rose over the camp, Hans looked toward the east and whispered a prayer that someday his words would carry not sorrow, but peace. The war was ending. The air itself seemed to know it, carrying a stillness that had not been felt in years and across the ocean. Both prisoners and families waited for the words that would tell them what came next in the camp. The mornings had grown warmer, the frost melting from the fences. The guards walked with lighter steps, and even the prisoners felt a change, though none spoke of it aloud. Hans woke each day to the sound of birds and wondered if they were the same kind that flew over his village. He had lost count of the months. But his hands had not forgotten the shape of work, the weight of wood and soil. The rhythm of living rumors spread through the barracks, whispers that peace was near, that the Germans had surrendered. Some said they would soon be sent home, others said they would stay to rebuild what had been destroyed. No one knew for certain. The uncertainty felt heavier than the fences that surrounded them. That afternoon, the commander gathered them in the yard. His voice carried over the wind. He spoke slowly, in English, and an interpreter repeated his words. Peace had been declared, the war was over. There were no cheers, only silence, a long, deep silence that felt like breath returning to a body that had been too long without air. Hans felt his knees weaken, his heart beating fast, but he could not call it joy. It was something deeper, something tangled with sorrow and disbelief in the village. His mother stood by the bakery window watching smoke rise from chimneys. The bell from the church rang a slow, solemn sound that carried through the valley. The people came out into the streets, not to celebrate, but to listen to the sound of an ending. Frau Adler held the letter from her son, close against her chest. She did not know if he would come home, or if he would choose to stay in that faraway land that had treated him with more kindness than his own. The letters had stopped weeks before the last one spoke of spring and of hope. It said that peace might come soon, and that he dreamed of walking by the river again. She read it every night before sleeping, whispering the words as if they were a prayer. The paper was worn soft from her hands, but the ink still clear. In America, the prisoners were told they would be released in groups. Some would go home within months, others would stay to help with farm work. Hans watched as trucks arrived, taking men away. He felt both relief and fear at the thought of leaving the camp that had become both cage and shelter. He wondered if homes still existed, if the streets and faces he remembered had survived the war. One evening he walked along the fence where wildflowers had begun to grow yellow, white, blue, the colors faint but alive. He knelt and touched them gently. He thought of his mother, of her, hands covered in flour and her voice calling his name. He wished he could send her one of those flowers to show her that beauty had returned to the world even in the most unlikely places. The next morning he was told to prepare for departure. He packed the few things he owned, a carved wooden bird, a folded blanket, a letter from his mother. He stood in line with the others as the trucks waited. The American guard who had once shared bread with him came forward and shook his hand. Hans tried to speak, but no words came. They looked at each other for a moment, and then the guard said only, "Safe journey, friend." The road stretched wide before them, lined with fields of green and gold. Hans watched through the truck window as the